Hi, good morning, and I'd like to welcome you to Poem Praise 2. I do thank you for tuning in. We are going to move right along and breaking the chains of psychological slavery. We only have two sections left, and we're done with the book. Now, I'm looking at this section, The Effect of Racial Images on African Americans. I just already did a preview of how long it is, so I'm going to do more than one take, but if it be in thy will, certainly. We're going to finish this book today. Show you right, show you right. Now let's go on and get it cracking in regards to the section, The Effect of Racial Images on African Americans. And it goes as such. For African Americans, racial religious imagery is even more devastating. We have demonstrated that the one who sees himself in the divine image is given an unnatural and a very inflated notion of what he or she is, which develops a kind of egotistical maniac. What is even worse, though, is what happens to the one who is not portrayed in the divine imagery and who worships a non-self in the image. In Judeo-Christian imagery, the Caucasian bows down and worships himself, and the African American worship the Caucasian as a god as well. Over 100 years ago, a brilliant African Christian theologian and student of the social sciences wrote a very important document. It is a document that has been obscured by time because of the revolutionary and important insights contained in the document. Every African American historians have failed to deal seriously with one of the most prospective and brilliant historians in modern times. The Cambridge graduate, Edward Blyden, wrote the document edited Islam, Christianity, and the Negro in 1888. He observed, "No one can deny the great aesthetic, aesthetic, and moral advantages which have occurred by the Caucasian race from Christian art. Through all of its stages of development, from the Good Shepherd of the Catacombs to the Transfiguration of Raphael, from rough mosaics to the inexpressible delicacy and beauty of Giotti and Fra Angelico. But to the Negro, all these exquisite representations exhibited only the psychological characteristics of a foreign race. And while they tended to quicken the taste and refine the sensibilities of that Caucasian race, they had only a depression influence upon the Negro, who felt that he had neither part nor lot so far as his physical character was concerned in these splendid representations. A strict adherence to the letter of the second commandment would have been no drawback to the Negro. To him, the painting and sculpture of Europe as instruments of education have been worse than failures. They have raised barriers in a way of his normal development. They have before him models of imitation, and his very effort to conform to the canons of taste, thus practically suggested, has impaired, if not destroyed, his self-respect and has made him the weakling and creeper when he appears to Christian land. It was our lot not long ago to hear an illiterate Negro in a prayer meeting in New York, entreat the deity to extend his lily white hands and bless the waiting congregation. Another with no greater amount of culture, preaching from John 3:2. We shall be like him, etc. He explained, brethren, imagine a beautiful white man with blue eyes, rosy cheeks, and flattened hair, and we shall be like him. The conception of these worshippers were what they gathered from plastic and pictorial representations, as well as from the characteristics of the dominant race above them. It is important to know that Dr. Blyland, over 100 years ago, was writing about the problem we are continuing to face today. The most obvious problem, which comes from the experience of seeing God in an image of somebody other than yourself, is that it creates an ideal that the image represented is superior and you are inferior. Once you have a concept that begins to make you believe you are not as good as other people, based upon the assumptions we have already established, your actions follow your mind. If you have had your mind set in a certain way, your behavior follows precisely the program of your mind. The content of this program determines who we are and what we are. So if you have internalized the view of the deity and the creator as being in flesh, having a nationality and physical characteristics different from yourself, then you automatically assume that you are inferior in your own characteristics. The sense of inferiority is not in the form of natural humility, which we discussed, but you begin to believe you have less human potential than one who looks like the image. The stage is not set for the cycle of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe they are superior and you are inferior. And sure enough, you will start acting inferior. You begin to dress inferior. You begin to feel inferior. You begin to think inferior. You begin to have families that are inferior. You become economically inferior. You become academically inferior. You begin to follow the program. The first psychological necessity of making someone into a slave is to make the person believe he or she ought to be a slave. One of the methods for making someone act in an inferior way is to convince him or her psychologically that he or she is inferior. Once that is done, the job is complete, because people proceed to live out the prophecy just as they should. This stands as the foundation of many other kinds of problems that such a people will face. What's interesting is that the Euro-American psychologists are fully aware of the impact and the other images have on people's self-esteem. The psychological literature well documents this phenomenon. Research by both Euro-American psychologists and their students and certain African-American psychologists, such as Dr. Kenneth Clark, support this notion. As far back as 1939, Dr. Clark and his wife did a study and demonstrated that little black children, as early as preschool, faced a major psychological problem. They did not like being black and did not like being black in a very positive light. The Clarks gave 3-year-old children black dolls and white dolls and asked them, which of these dolls is prettier? The children chose the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Caucasian doll. When asked which doll is smart, the response was the same, Caucasian doll. Asked which one would you like to look like, the same one. Asked which one is ugly, the one that looked like the 3-year-old black child was selected. This study was published in 1939. Ironically, this problem has been here for a very long time. In the 1960s, a change came about. One of the first things that the black activists began to question was the fact that the textbooks, the actors on TV, and in the movies, even the mannequins in the store windows did not look like them. The black sociologists, psychologists, theologians, and educators said, we must change these textbooks and make the books have characters that look like us. Hundreds of concerned black scholars and activists produced all kinds of data to show that the school books needed not only little white Dick, Jane, and Spot, but they needed little black children as well. Everyone from department store merchants to Hollywood producers were warned that blacks would not patronize them if our images were not represented in their products. Justifiably, we wanted black faces wherever African American people were being influenced. The seriousness of the Caucasian religious imagery is revealed by the realization of the absence of concern about these images. Almost no one dealt with the representation of God and all of the heavenly host in Caucasian flesh. I was just reading some little small print right here, which I'm definitely going to read that too. In small print before I turn the page, it says, the distinct exception in Reverend Albert Clegy, who established his shrine of the Black Madonna Church in Detroit in the early 1960s, as a statement against the influence of this Caucasian image of God on African Americans, though he identified the authentic African contribution to biblical history. He concluded by submitting a limited black image for the limited white image. We must admit that his invitation was more healthy psychologically than the prevalent white image. Us, teaching us. And I'm going to actually stop right here for take 1. And please stay tuned to Poem Praise 2 for take 2 of Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. We are in the 3rd section, Racial, Religious Imagery, and Psychological Confusion. And the section that we are in is the effect of racial images on African Americans. So certainly be blessed. I will holler at you real soon here on Poem Praise 2. So, you know what I'm saying. Later, y'all. All right, I holler.